Good morning everyone, it's now 10 o'clock so I'm going to start the meeting. Welcome to today's Audit Committee meeting. This is not a public meeting but a meeting the public can attend. I'm Councillor Austin White, Chair of the Audit Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone present to the Audit Committee meeting today. Before I commence, I would like to outline the domestic arrangements for the meeting. We are not expecting a fire practice today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the chamber, then turn right and proceed down the stairway through the emergency exit on the ground floor. The assembly point is in the public square in front of CAST beyond the fountain. Anybody with mobility issues should wait in the refuge area near the lift and use the intercom to call for assistance. This meeting will be recorded and published on the council's website. By entering the council chamber, you are accepting that you will be recorded and your images will be retained and broadcast by the council. If anyone intends to record today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting. Please ensure your mobile phones are switched to silent mode or off if you prefer. Thank you. I'll now commence the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies. In fact, we've got a full house. So that's not a first, but it's good. Item 2, exclusion of public and the press. There are no items on the agenda where public and press are to be excluded. Is that agreed, colleagues? Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? Okay. If anything comes up, we'll have to fill a declaration form in and forward it to Governance Services. Item 4, minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 1st of February 2024. Can these minutes be ruled as a true and accurate record, colleagues? And Chair, and seconded? Yeah, all agreed. Thank you. Item 5, Audit Committee action log. All members will have read the report, so I'll ask Peter Jackson, Head of Internal Audit, if he wishes to bring any specific items to our attention or has anything to add to the report since it was drafted. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. By way of update, on page 10, we completed this report in advance of the training on the schools control risk assessment, but as you recall, we ran out of time at the training session, so it wasn't delivered. It will be delivered at a future training session. And by way of update on the DSG all members update, it's stating a date of the 5th of June. It's likely to be the 13th of June, Chair, but details will be coming out on that shortly. Have to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. No questions from me. Colleagues, anyone any questions on this item? No? Okay, we'll move to the recommendation. The committee is asked to note the progress being made against the actions agreed at the previous committee meetings. Is that moved and seconded, colleagues? Yes, and all agreed. Thank you. The recommendation is noted. Item 6, annual report of the monitoring officer. Again, we'll take the reports as read by members, so I'll ask Scott Focus, Service Director for Legal and Democratic Services, if he wishes to bring any specific issues to members' attention, or if you have anything to add to the report since it was drafted, Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I think in summary, I'm pleased to report that complaint activity has fallen across both ward councillors and parish and town councillors and is reaching levels previously unseen. And in relation to that, it is in the report, and I do say it every year, but I think it's always worth reiterating that across Doncaster, which falls under my responsibility, there are 37 parish, town councils and other bodies, and over 350 serving councillors. Most of those do not fall on the radar, and I think that is absolutely something that should be noted, that the number of complaints tends to get highlighted and sometimes appears in local press, but actually there are 300 and not very good at maths, about 340 people that are working very, very hard and have absolutely no contact with the code of conduct, and I think that should be remarked upon because people are giving up their time for very good reason and doing as is asked of them. In relation to the whistleblow report, there are 2 items that are detailed there. on an annual basis, you often ask me, is that a good number or a bad number, and what do others do? And every year I probably fudge it slightly by saying I don't really know, and it's hard for me to quantify because each local authority is different, and all we can really do is push out the knowledge of the whistleblower policy, and our whistleblower policy is pretty wide in terms of those who are eligible to make complaints under it if they're so inclined. We have sort of reviewed that over the course of the year. We've put it out through our own internal channels. We've included direct line phone numbers and email addresses as was asked by members last year, so they don't need to go through the council switchboard anymore. And I'd like to think we can evidence that that being successful by the fact that one of those reports was emailed directly to Peter and I guess they wouldn't have found that otherwise without that. In relation to kind of what other councils do, I took half an hour to look at what other councils do, which I probably should do more because it's interesting sort of how other councils work and how weird their websites are as well, and how I found unusable. But according to report in 2022, Barnsley had 9 whistleblowers in 12 months. According to an earlier audit committee this year, Wakefield Council had 3 in 6 months. And according to a press report from I think the latter part of last year, Sheffield had 5 in 8 years. There is no comparator between those figures whatsoever. The larger council appears to have, and a council that's had some well-documented controversies in recent years, has had fewer. The smaller council has had more. I've absolutely no idea how I can work that out. What I can say is that we remain open and we report openly. Well, you know yourself, we come here every year, we report the whistleblowing activity. We do that in an open and transparent report. One of those councils does not do that. It was in a private report, so I couldn't even see how many they had. I think we approach it as best we can, how people interpret it and how people interpret their willingness to use the system that's been put in place. I can't really comment on other than to keep pushing it out there, and I can honestly say we deal with it openly and honestly when it comes through. I think that probably covers the bits I wanted to highlight. I'm sure you have questions, Chair, because we've done this for the last 7 years.
Thank you, Scott. Colleagues, any questions for Scott this morning? Glenn?
Thanks very much. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Just a minor one. I mean, it's good to see that the level of incidents are reducing in terms of reports to councillors. That's always good. And I just, kind of flicking through them, there's a couple of apologies there, but obviously most of which are outside of scope. I do wonder what we do in terms of, educating our parish councillors around what is within scope of the monitoring officers to intervene in and what's not in scope, because obviously it's still time that it takes from your team, and obviously it does, it's something that quite rightly we do note. So I was just wondering, do we engage at parish council level? Do we ever deliver any kind of training around it, so they can, to equip them to cut it off at the pass, as it were, and deal with it locally? I know that they're incredibly difficult organisations sometimes to manage, but just wondered if we did, Scott.
When the newer code was brought in, which you'll remember because you were part of this group that sort of that talked about it, which is only a couple of years ago now. There was lots and lots of work then. We had various sessions that we invited parish councils to, so there was lots of engagement at that point in time. So most of them have only relatively recently looked at it, certainly with this election cycle. They do all outs as well. So the next set of all outs is the same as ours, so it's next May. So we've had that engagement, and I can't remember what the numbers were, but within the report, we're more or less up to 100% on councils adopting that code. So a couple have gone through that process literally in the last few weeks, in the case of two of them. We have strong relationships or strong contacts with some councils and not with others. The ones that we have better or stronger relationships with are the ones that tend to need our assistance more. So I guess in that sense that they are dealing with it as it happens, rather than necessarily a full lot of proactive work. I think what we'll probably do is make an offer of training available post next May. That would make sense because there will in theory be a lot of new councillors coming in. Most of the councils here also engage with either NALC or YLCA, who also offer lots of training both online and in person. So I think they are getting that advantage from other places as well as me. So we make the offer out there, but you know some feel the need, some don't. And you know, busy people trying to find times to attend their own meetings rather than talk and joke with me for half an hour. So, but yeah, we have the offer out there, and if people want it, it's there. But yeah, the numbers are pretty low.
So I'll just follow up on that before Glenn comes in, because I think we have 8 parish councils in my ward. Some are sort of a steady body they've been there for a long time, experience. There's the bigger ones, you know, I know you refer to bigger ones that seem to have more problems. They seem to get a lot of change throughout the year even. So I'm wondering whether they get their membership, and some of those that come on don't last. So whether their membership ever gets the opportunity during that period. I'm not saying do anything now. I think you're right to bring it up again next May, but with the membership changing so quite regularly in some quarters, I don't know what others have. They have parish councils, what it's like there, but I'm sure that maybe some slip through the nets. But anyway, I'll leave it there. I'll come back with another question later. I'll hand on to Glenn because he's waited patiently.
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, so like Austin and I also sit on a number of parish councils as well, many of which you're familiar with. I always like to see my own experience and thoughts reflected in data when I see it. I was expecting to see a couple of other complaints on here. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. Why are they not reflected on this data? How have they been dismissed, and why are they not on here?
Just before I answer that, Chair, I don't know if you want to push your mic slightly nearer than you. It may just be my hearing, but I'm not sure what the camera will pick up. I think it's in the report that the complaint activity that's mentioned are the ones that come through on a formal process, and that was introduced as a recommendation from yourselves back some time ago, that actually for a complaint to be fully considered or truly considered, it needs to come in on the council's complaint form. A simple sort of email or a phone call won't suffice. And I know that seems a bit of an admin burden, but there is good reason for it. Firstly, that the complaint form takes you through the process and includes, asks you to identify what element of the code you think has been broken, and also at the end asks you what recompense or sanction you're looking for. So there is good reason for it. So what I don't note down in there are the emails and the phone calls that I get, or the emails and the phone calls that others get. And in relation to one of your parish councils in your area, the one nearer where I live, is I get emails, and I generally tell the individuals, and it's often the same individual, can you please complete the attached form that I've sent to you? And here's the process, and here's the code. and I don't get anything back. So whether it's I can't be bothered, whether it's too hard, or whether it's I've vented my spleen and I've moved on, or whether it's actually when I've looked at the process and I've looked at the code, what I didn't like isn't actually a breach of the code. There are definitely some personality clashes in that council, the old and the new. I think you understand what I mean when I say that. The old and the new, and they're never going to get on, and that's an issue. But we do have phone calls, but I don't measure those because other people will get phone calls as well that I can't possibly measure. So, and then say we follow the process. But I have spent quite a lot of time talking to people from that area, both on the council and who used to be on the council and who make complaints. And I've explained these issues, and I think there's a dynamic in small villages where everybody knows everyone. Everybody knows that someone is a councillor. But what they are doing is not necessarily acting as a councillor at that point in time, and there is a distinction between it. The fact that you know they're a councillor doesn't mean that they are a councillor at that moment in time. They're not wearing their councillor hat, and I think that is a distinction that often comes out in the complaint form. Okay.
Sorry, just to come back on that, there were another two parish councils I had in mind as well who had an incident over the last 12 months. I think they're linked by that incident. That was another one I expected to see on there. Is that another one that's perhaps been handled more informally, as you just mentioned?
It didn't make it to a complaint form. There were phone calls, there was ad hoc advice. Some of those people were more senior and chose to deal with it through their own means and perhaps within the confines of their own organisation, rather than feeling the need to raise it with me formally. The process is open to them. We invite them to do it. However, as many people often find out, I won't get on my soapbox again because I did that for three years after they reinvented the code. But the sanctions that are available often aren't what people are looking for, because people often they want that person to no longer be a councillor or to cease being a councillor for a period. That simply isn't in the code. We are talking about apologies, and we're talking about training. We're talking about some public approbation in a reported meeting, some sort of media comment, perhaps a group sanction, which kind of works in this environment. That your group says that person shouldn't be the chair of this meeting anymore, or perhaps does something within the group and its organisation. That works pretty well where that's concerned. But in terms of independent members, people on parish councils, people who are often apolitical in that sense, has no effect whatsoever. The code even still talks about taking your mobile phone off you. Well, that's a sort of 1990 sanction, isn't it? When it was this great benefit to have been given a work mobile phone. That isn't quite the case anymore. So yeah, the sanctions aren't really what they were, but that's a decision taken by government, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
And just a final comment on that. In terms of, you mentioned they're obviously quite informal conversations and emails. Would it be feasible to kind of have some reporting on that so we could see the level of potentially almost vexatious activities against a parish council? Or would that be perhaps unworkable?
I think the informality has some dangers around it, because I'm not sure quite how we would measure it. What I can do is and I hope Peter's going to minute, or Emma's going to minute this and remind me if I do hold it out. What I can do is put some sort of summation paragraph in next year in terms of how busy it feels informally, but without providing any details or breakdown by council. If that feels like something you would like.
It may be that I'm an outlier on this, but I would discourage that. Just from the point of view of, you know, if it's not an official complaint, it doesn't exist. And you and I have talked about this at length over the last few years and come to an agreement after not always agreeing over it. And I think it's really important, because otherwise it's just rumour. It's just, you know, it could be just vexatious. It could have no merit. And I think to even kind of recognise something like that, it gives it some kind of merit. And I would just say that you know, if it makes it to an official form, then otherwise it's of no use, is it? It's of no use to know that.
It was more the opposite of measuring how level of the vexatious activity might be. It was measuring the opposite as opposed to measuring.
I think you've just got to be very careful of starting to measure something that doesn't exist, shall we say, in officialdom. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that is best left. Personally, I think it's best left with the monitoring officer to deal with it unofficially and advise. If it does make it to a form, then it makes it to record. But that's my view. Committee may disagree, but I've myself and Scott have talked at great length over this, haven't we, over the years? And there is a principle that is there to follow for a reason. But that's just my view.
Sorry, can I just come in then? I can see benefit in either approach. Well, I think what I can say, I mean, you're obviously aware of some areas just because of local knowledge. I don't think that's reflected across the council, across Doncaster. I think there are areas. It's often a couple of individuals, frankly, that just increase that. It's often some personality clashes. So I think there isn't a. I don't feel that there is an underlying element of poor behaviour that isn't making it through into formal complaints, if that was an assurance that anybody wanted. There are some pockets of people that don't get on with each other for whatever reasons, often because of some local tensions. That isn't really reflected across the whole of the borough. I sort of stand by what I said earlier, that of the 350 people who were, I assume they're all individuals, who were working hard on parish and town councils, most of them have absolutely no contact through any means of what I have. And very often, I think many of you are on parish councils or have been on parish councils. I think a lot of stuff is just dealt with locally. I think sometimes one of the other councils will just take someone to outside and sort of say, that isn't how we work here. They call out poor behaviour locally, and it doesn't make it to me. So if that gives you an assurance, I don't feel that this is a extraordinarily large percentage of my day job. It's a big role, but it isn't something that I'm dealing with continually, thankfully. Not all MOs, I think, are in that position, but yeah, I'm probably quite comforted that I am. If they removed Facebook from the planet, I would probably have very little role to do, but I think that horse may have bolted.
John, you wanted to raise a question.
Just to come into it, not a question. Whilst I understand where Glenn's coming from, and has already been pointed out by Scott, there isn't a huge amount that's coming through on the unofficial side of it. I could see the benefit then, because the way I'm looking at it is, how does it improve our services? How does it improve the processes? And it won't. It's just there. And as already been pointed out, it's gentlemen or ladies' agreements to differ at some point. Apologies, whatever. but there isn't the amount coming through that I can see from what Scott's saying. And so therefore I totally agree with what David has said, and I wouldn't agree with necessarily measuring the unknown as I see it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No further questions? No. Okay. My questions have sort of been picked up by the colleagues now. So for the Audit Committee, the report, bearing in mind Glenn's question about why weren't some items on, but which you've answered adequately, the report is positive and means we've no matters to address formally as the standard subcommittee regarding the conduct and activity of various individuals and bodies, as we have had to do in the past. And I think, as you mentioned, Scott, that it may be some individuals, because a number of years ago we had quite a few cases to review for parish councils in the east part of Doncaster. And now that's gone quiet, so whether those individuals have learnt from your wise words or whether they've no longer on the parish council, I'm not privy to that. But I think this report is showing perhaps a level of behaviour that's improved over the years. So on that note, colleagues, I'll read out the recommendation within the report. Is that coming over all right now, where that is? Speak, can you hear me?
Yeah, a bit closer.
A bit closer? Maybe, so... Really? All right. So, right, okay. I'll step it up a bit. Right, the recommendation is asked to, one, the committee is asked to, one, note the MO's annual report on complaint handling activity for the period 1st of April 2023 to 31st of March 2024. Two, note the whistleblowing returns for 2023-24 and note the nil money laundry reports for the 2023-24. Is that moved and seconded, colleagues? Yeah. And all agreed. The recommendations are noted. Right, item 7, breaches and waivers to the Council's contract procedure rules, CPRs. All members have read the report, so I'll ask Holly Wilson, Head of Procurement, if she wishes to bring anything specific, any specific issues to members' attention, or has anything to add to the report since it was drafted. Holly?
Thank you, Chair. Just to note a few points. So this report covers a period between the 1st of September 23 and the 29th of February, as it was a leap year of this year. There has been an increase, unfortunately, in breaches from 3 to 7, and the detail of those is in the report. There's also been an increase in the amount of waivers from 11 to 16, but that hovers around a sort of normalised level. To note is that the CPRs were changed in September 23, and I did brief committee on those changes. So the period that this report covers is sort of over both of a little bit fell into it because it was the end of September. So some of it fell into the old rules and some in the new. The most significant part of that in relation to this report is that the categories for granting waivers did change. We increased those. Another thing to know is also after the Health and Social Care Act came into place, there are new methods around procuring health-related contracts, which now come under the provider selection regime. We love an acronym, so it's the PSRs. So those are now under a different regime, but also we do control them still in procurement. Open to take questions.
Okay, before we move to questions, may I remind members of the Audit Committee we're here to ensure the process for managing breaches and waivers is in place and is being followed by officers. We're not necessarily looking at each individual waiver, which has been properly considered and approved by management. The Audit Committee require assurances that the arrangements to manage, approve and monitor breaches and waivers are in place. So, questions, colleagues? Does anyone wish to raise something this morning?
Morning, Holly. I always love it when you come in front of us. I look forward to it. I find this subject fascinating, and actually, I do think we, as a general rule, we have quite a good handle on it. So I do have some questions, and strangely enough, I'm going to start with place. So I am interested in the fact that we seem to have a lot of breaches from place, and they all seem to have similar comments. I'm just wondering, has there been a significant personnel change? Is that a reason behind it, or what is the main reason why we've had so many breaches?
Yeah, no, good question. So the new breaches that have been brought to committee are focused in place in the same service area. There's not been a significant change of personnel, but the contracts that these relate to are one-off contracts for a programme of works linked to grant funding. So there was a need to expedite those contracts. Unfortunately, officers, due to that, I would put that down as the major reason, did not follow correct process, partly through not understanding what they needed to do, and did not communicate effectively with my team, which is unusual because we do a lot of work with place, and they do contract a lot, probably more so than any other area of the council. And as you can see from the comments, some of this is around where they've got 2 quotes as opposed to 3 quotes. So it is a minor, they still have sort value for money, but again, they've not done it correctly. Some of the more significant ones where they should have got tenders, again, one of them was, there was a belief in the area that, well, English Heritage are dictating to us who we use, because obviously it's a listed building and so on. And we can cover that off with a CPR waiver, because we get it. We sometimes are dictated to by these bodies on who we need to use. Again, it's a procedural issue as opposed to they've done anything that's, from a sort of, they just don't want to follow the rules perspective. So, yeah, it is disappointing. We have had some lengthy discussions with the service area involved. They already have undergone some additional training for the officers specified in the breaches. There will be continued work with that area, and I've actually spoke to the head of service involved earlier this week around that. He said that he's fully engaged on what needs to happen. He knows that the significance of this. And he's fully engaged with that, and he's supportive of getting his officers up to speed, but it is disappointing, yeah.
Yeah, it was also my question as well, Holly. And I know you're not here to defend officers in place, but I was the same with Glenn. Has there been a change of staff? No. So they know the procedure, they know the rules. And if they've got any doubts, why don't they pick up the phone to you? Getting 2 quotes when you need 3. Was it that 3 were never returned after the 6 they asked for, or what? I don't want to go into the detail, but I think it's not a very good reflection on place, and I'm sure the director doesn't like being bottom of the league. I certainly wouldn't, and hopefully they're not going to appear again. And you say you were having some dialogue with them there. So enough said on that one, I think, unless anybody else wants to come in.
Just to comment, really, obviously, as you will be, it's disappointing that we've seen an increase. Just looking at it, though, on the whole, it does appear to be sort of technicalities that have not had a material impact on the costs or the delivery, which is obviously important. I think it's just important that when you do go back, you impress upon the various people in place that we don't want to see a continued increase, and we'd like to see a decrease at next report for obvious reasons. But there's nothing that is too scary in the sense of the impact of outcomes. So we have to be grateful of that, really. I think just get the ducks lined up and make sure that there's not a continued increase in breaches. That's my only comment, Chair.
That, Dave.
I mean, I echo Councillor Shaw's comments. My fervent hope is that this is a blip that will be not reflected further. I mean, you know this, or I hope you know this, that we have a very much warts and all approach to reporting here. You know, we are showing you, you know, this at its worst. You know, historically numbers were significantly worse. We got into a really good position. I don't want to see it retract. I won't tell you exactly what words we used when we identified the number that we were reporting this time, but it wasn't a good one. You know, it was a shock and it was a disappointment, and you know, the fact that we have to come here and report this news, you know, will be reflected back to others. And if it is if were it to be repeated again, I'm sure that you'd be inviting individual directors across, and we'd be saying that as well. So what I want to make sure is that, and you know, Holly will do this, I'm absolutely convinced, is that this is a blip. They're on the sort of radar, that there have been early interventions. You know, one can only hope that picks up its effectiveness and we move forward. So yeah, I don't want to be coming back with these sorts of numbers, and having got to a reasonable place in previous reports, you know, I don't want to see us slip back to earlier. It's, you know, once you get to the top of the mountain, you don't necessarily want to start falling back down it. So we will give you that assurance that we'll be doing what we can to ensure that it's a better picture in future times.
Yeah, I think all members of the committee would agree with your comments, Scott. And I mean, I've looked down, and I think I could probably tell you which department in the directorate it is, just looking at the items. So even you could probably hone it in a little bit more detail, accurately, than place. I don't know the name of it, but I can just tell where it is from the descriptions of the breaches. So whilst we acknowledge the incidents are relatively low, I think it's fair to say we do feel there's still some room for improvement in achieving compliance with contract procedure rules. That's not, again, a reflection on the procurement team, it's a reflection on the officers who are not doing it. So is it easy for you to give us a very brief outline on the sort of general and targeted training you give to officers? And would you then, instance like this, would you then be revisiting that particular department and refreshing their memories of what they should be doing?
Yeah, so we still offer the face-to-face training currently, and the e-learn package is written and being tested currently. We're a few months behind due to work capacity, but that is rolled out. I've agreed with HR that will be mandatory for all budget holders and above, and also officers involved in contracts and procurement, which we know who we deal with, so they will have to have done it. And we'll also, when people are putting through certain forms through our systems, we'll be checking that they've had that training once it goes live, and we'll be picking up any stragglers. So there is two elements of training. For me, there's more work to do around training on specifications and quotation and tendering. So we've done a really good job, and we've covered off a significant amount of officers through CPR training face-to-face, and it is quite arduous face-to-face, and it's taking people out of the roles to do that. So the e-learn should hopefully sort of expedite officers being trained. But we've revisited the CPR training with officers involved, but they'll also be undergoing some how to get a quotation and exercise, because again we need to keep building on the quality of specifications, works information and so on, and the understanding of terms and conditions and so on. We've done NAC4 training with colleagues before. We've done training around terms and conditions. So I think we've got a programme of training. It is about us expanding that across the council, time permitting.
And with all this training and monitoring and recording, is it something that you could share with us to say, not individuals, but what various departments have had and been trained up? So, for example, Place have now, they've got that, I don't know how many departments they've got in there, but they're all now been fully trained, and I suppose that gives us a bit more assurance that they've done the training. So, and if this scenario develops again, which I certainly hope it doesn't, we've got something to refer back to. Sorry, Glenn was going to come in, but I'll wait for Perminder, because I think you're wanting to come in, Perminder.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, if I may. Is there any exposure for the council in not following contract procedure rules? And the angle I'm thinking of is from external contractors who may not be happy with the decisions that the council has made in individual departments.
It's a good question. None of these breaches are legal breaches, as we'd say. So none of them have crossed the thresholds under the public procurement thresholds. So there's no exposure, even though below threshold, we should follow the principles of as was EU procurement. So there's no exposure for the council, but if we did breach, we did contract and it was above threshold, that would be more of an issue potentially for us if a contractor was aggrieved by that. But none of these have breached those legal thresholds.
Holly, I don't know if my maths is just failing me this morning, but I had a look at this the other day when we were talking to Peter, and I thought I'd got it wrong, and now I'm not so sure if I've got it wrong, so just bear with me. On page 34, we've got a table showing the total contracts awarded versus the number of waivers, which is fair enough, from 1st September to 29th of February this year. So if we follow the line for AHW, we've got the 2 waivers, 1.3 million, total contracts 9, and the total value of the contracts awarded at 1.475. So what I wanted to do is then also have a look at total non-compliance. So what would it be if we added up the waivers and the breaches? But when I add that up, I get more than 1.75. So I get 1.7 million, which is more than the contracts awarded. So am I missing something? And I'll tell you how I got to that. So I went back to the table. I took the AHW in breaches, and then I took the... so that one in breaches is 392, and then I added it to the waivers, which gets me to 1.7. Have I done something wrong?
No, the way that the total value of the contracts awarded is for the total period. The breach relating to adults' health and wellbeing is the supported accommodation and floating. Is that the one where you've used the 392? No. Yeah, so that's in a previous period, and that's over the total contract period. So that'll have been recorded in before that. So it might not fall within.
So the reporting date is November 2023, but you're saying that the spend relates to a previous period?
Yeah, so the November date is when I brought it to committee, but the contract might have been breached. I think it was breached actually before September 23 from memory. So it would have hit another period. So that contract award would have gone in before that period, but I brought it to you guys in November.
Yes, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. I just wanted to just return to the sort of training and that kind of area. So the first question is that the people responsible for the waivers, the individuals responsible for the waivers, are the people that's not received training or people that have forgotten training?
Yeah, we did check this, and they had the training a few years ago. And that again brings me to reflect on how often we refresh that training, because we do refresh the CPRs, not regularly, but they have been refreshed quite a few times. So again, I think we need to, from my team's perspective, ensure that all the right people are being trained and refreshed on a regular basis. That's something I need to think about. We're doing quite a lot of work on the training at the moment, because we've got the new Procurement Act, which I consulted with the Audit Committee in training the other week. So we've got a full list now of people across the council who will need that training. So I'm going to use that list, and I want a new training programme developed from ourselves. We've managed to go over from a capacity perspective, my team have done a significant amount of contracting over the last year, beyond anything we've seen before. But we do feel like we're tipping over now into where we're creating more capacity to be able to do these value-add activities to prevent causing us more work in the long run.
So that really, I mean, you've kind of partly answered what my second question would be, or was going to be. But I think that it's, for me, I'm uncomfortable with this idea that we will kind of, step up the frequency without it being a number or a figure. So i.e., we're all councillors as well, are subject to mandatory training at certain intervals. And I personally would like to see it be mandatory training at certain intervals, whether it be decided it's, suitable at 12 months, 2 years, or whatever that be. And I think that would be an important step forward, but also that would be then, we would create a framework there where directors of certain areas would have to ensure that their areas are compliant with that as well, or come before us and justify that. So that, I mean, I presume that's kind of in your mind, but you've not exactly said it. So I wonder what you would suggest in terms of going forward. What would be a sensible time period before that training lapse needs to be revisited?
Yeah, so the CPRs will need a full rewrite after the new Procurement Act. And I'm going to take that as we're going to roll out the e-learn as is on the existing CPRs with the list that we have. So they will all get it fresh. They will have to do it. It will be mandatory. We'll then we'll be rewriting the CPRs and rolling it. Then there'll be a new refresh of that e-learn. And then I would hope that there would not need to be CPR refreshers moving forward of a significant nature for quite a while. So it probably would be something we'd do on a 2-yearly basis. But again, I've not agreed that with HR, but it will be it will be mandatory once it's rolled out. It's in testing at the moment.
Carry on. So again, and I know you can't say specifically now, but it would be good to be able to report back to committee. I think, sort of what that, because quite a while obviously is not a defined period, is it? And I think I'd also probably, if it could be passed to the appropriate directors, that obviously if the breaches continue, we might want to look at how the training is going. We did this with North Bridge, didn't we? Where we got the figures of who'd been trained and who'd not been trained. And with the Chair's permission, I'd like to request that if going forward we continue to see the level of breaches or increase in breaches, that that directors are aware that would be an expectation from committee. Is that it?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Dave, and I think it's something I've discussed. And before Northbridge, we had the health and safety mandatory training. However, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but to make training mandatory, it's not a snap of the fingers. There's a process to go through. I don't know what it is, but I understand you can't just do it tomorrow and say, right, everybody's going to be trained.
I have agreed with HR. I did go through the process that you described, so I have agreed that it will be mandatory for certain officers. Yeah.
Yes, don't we still have a hard copy that somebody can take off the shelf and look up and say, don't you do that? Well, it's okay then, it's online, you can log on. You know, when I was doing it, it was a little black book, I believe.
There's like a little portal that everybody gets notifications about the training that's required. It alerts you when your mandatory training is up for renewal. So, and you can draw records off. What Holly's, we haven't got that product. That's basically what.
Yeah, it's in test.
So once that product's available, then Holly's talking about rewrite as well. And then there's the frequency, so that then there's the triggers built into the system that comes through. But all the infrastructure that's required in order to trigger, monitor, etc. is all in place.
I just, I don't know, you know, again, without labouring it, but I'm going to, because the failure here is of the renewal of the training, because we've got people who've been trained. They have been, if we'd said, well, they've not been trained, and there's some timescale problem with that, then that's where the failure is. But we've got people who have been trained, whose training or knowledge has lapsed, and then we've breached. So the failure here is the training. That's not your failure. I'm not pointing the finger at you, but that's the point of failure. Because if we were renewing training on a suitable basis, then, you know, we would, I'm not saying there's not going to be things happen, but there would be a lot less likelihood that if people are receiving regular updates that will likely to breach. I can see Debbie's going to come in to object to that point, but that's fine. We may disagree.
It isn't necessarily about training. This is about the application and the circumstances of which they've been operating. So they've been under a lot of pressure to live on projects, and the bespoke nature of the work that they've been undertaken, that is the circumstances which is arrived at this point. Notwithstanding that memories do lapse in those circumstances, so the training is vitally important. So I think that's all been acknowledged. But I just wanted to make sure it's the context that they've been operating largely has dictated why we've got to where we've got to. And it's important, I guess, from an organisational point of view, because the pace of delivery, the resources we have of all isn't going to abate. So that's the reason why it must be at the front of people's minds about the requirements to of operating in that environment when they're discharging their roles. So that's what we need to do. Make sure that it's front, that they're familiar with it, but they're equally, that the processes we have are slick and timely so that they can discharge their role, because, as I've just said, the pace of the organisation, the resources we have isn't going to abate. And I suppose just linking back to the question or the point that was raised by Perminder about challenge from the environment, from other contractors. The reason why there isn't a lot of because we haven't got a lot of contractors, that's part of the reason why there's breaches and waivers requested, because there's not hundreds of people out there baying for this type of work in terms of the time frame, the value, or the very nature of what they're doing. So that's why we're not getting the real challenge, because there's just not there's a paucity of supply.
Well, you've not convinced me. Why aren't all the other directorates failing then? If it's not down to the people, they know. Everybody knows you've got to get 3 quotes, and you've got to go to tender. You can't just do it without. I'm not going to go and labour it, but I'm not convinced that. Yes, they need the training, but you need to be switched on when you're doing it.
Absolutely, Chair. That's why I said it needs to be at the forefront of the mind in terms of discharging their role.
Just, it's second nature. Yes.
I was just going to reply to one of your early questions in terms of, yes, the CPRs are all on the website, there's guidance. So Holly's team provide a lot of support, and it is that thing about, if you've got a question, they're there. you know, and like Debbie says, always thinking, what are the CPRs? What am I doing? Am I making sure that I'm following them? So like you say, you can do training, and then it's then using the training, using the guidance, using the information, using the support. So, and that's what we're, you know, Holly's got a clear program in terms of getting in there. You know, we're here, you know, doing the training, like I say, the update, the guidance really quickly in terms of the update, in terms of the CPRs. And I think some of the, going back to Minda's, it's about value for money. So a lot of the CPRs is about making sure we're getting value for money, making sure we're getting, you know, the contracts, the price that is the best, well, and also, you know, economy, efficiency, you know, the whole shebang really in terms of delivering that. And I think what they've kind of said is, yes, they've not followed due process in some of these, but they can see that they've, you know, they have kind of tried to get value for money, but that's what, you know, some of the CPRs is about. It's about value for money as well. And I know
We accept that part of it, but there is, you know, all these breaches, didn't ever think, oh, I need a waiver. You know, it's...
That's what I was going to say. We have procedures for this obvious reason, and that's the thing. I accept what you're saying, Debbie, and I know, because I know some of the schemes, and I've worked alongside officers with them, delivering them, and I appreciate that we are, you know, running at a huge pace, and the way the funding comes in and the time constraints, and you know, just if you just look at the bike lane projects, just for one aspect of this, that, you know, and there's many other projects that are running alongside that, so I kind of completely get that. But as the chair said, you know, we do have procedures, and that's the point, isn't it? We can cover this off if there is an issue and we can't get 3 quotes, then we can't get 3 quotes, but they can apply for a waiver. And I think that's what's the concerning thing. So we can see the circumstances. So I do come back to my original point, is that, you know, training is the key, and we would be remiss not to, you know, put a time scale on the regularity at which people are trained. You've been waiting for ages, Scott, haven't you?
I mean, I'm happy to include paragraphs in future reporting around training, and as Holly said, there'll be a substantive rewrite of CPRs when the Procurement Act is fully in place. And of course, those of you who've been on this committee a while will remember that CPRs need approval at full council, and prior to that, there is definitely involvement from this committee, either as a host of a wider committee or as a specific visit and a recommendation to full council. I am sure at that point in time that we will have covered how we're going to train and embed that, and if we don't, I guess that one of you will probably make that as a comment in recommendations and again towards full council. So in terms of building on that training plan going forward and ensuring a sort of regularity of that, and explaining who is to receive that training, because it's not everybody needs it, because to some extent it would be wasted on some people because they don't do any procurement activity, whereas, and it's not even a grade, as those who used to work here remember, it's not even a grade boundary point, because there are people on differing grades in different parts of the organisation that will be more and less involved in procurement. But it is about identifying everybody who's going to come across that and ensuring that they're fully trained. And I used to have a little contract procedure rules booklet as well. It was a bound plastic thing with loose leaf. You used to get it when you got to a certain grade, and that was a strange thing, because it was almost like if you were below that grade, you didn't need it. So it is now fully available on the intranet, and I'm sure we can show you where it is if you can't find it.
But somebody will come and ask you, can I have a look in the black book, Scott, or the red one, financial?
There used to be a school one as well, and an FPR one. Yeah. But I don't even have a bookshelf or a cupboard anymore, so...
And then we'll
Sorry,
move on.
I'm not totally convinced this is all about training. Because for me, these things normally happen. People want to do their job. Typically, they want to do the right thing. So what this is sounding to me, there's a bit of a cultural issue here. I'm not entirely sure that training is going to resolve it. I think it seems to me that people are making a conscious decision to just get their job done, and that actually having a breach is probably easier than whatever sanction And whatever sanctions come with breaches is probably easier than not getting their job done. And I think we need to, I don't know what the answer is to that, but somehow we need to change that situation where doing this correctly is easier than having a breach. And I'd like to see that they can get their job done and done properly, because I think that's what the issue is, and it's not just down to training.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we have brought them to task on this. We have had, I mean, Debbie has been involved and Scott. So I totally agree. And we will rectify it.
Well, point taken, Glenn. I think I will take that away with you. We've spent a lot more time on this item than I anticipated we would. However, I was going to ask Scott and Holly the usual question. That I know you've expressed your disappointment with the figures today, but generally speaking, are you satisfied with the arrangements of the council in procurement? And I guess the answer would be yes, because if you look across the other directorates, there's not that concern there. Is that fair to say? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the recommendation. The committee, 1, notes the waivers and breaches recorded for the period between 1st September 2023 and the 29th of February 2024, and notes the work undertaken by the Strategic Procurement Team, SPT, to ensure compliance and deliver services. Is that moved, colleagues? Seconded and all agreed. Thank you very much. Well, recommendations are noted. We'll move on to item 8, which is the 2023-24 draft annual government statement. All members have read the report, so I'll ask Debbie Hogg, Executive Director, Corporate Resources, if she wishes to bring any specific issues to members' attention or has anything to add since the report was drafted. Debbie?
Thank you, Chair. What you've got in, this is the annual report, where we review the environment that that's currently operates with a view to bringing those matters to your attention, which significant concern are areas where we take a broader view than the actual drafting required, which is that so that we're keeping the key matters are sort of in our view, because we use it as a monitoring tool. You can see that there's a number of matters which have been completed, and there's a number of matters which we've decided to continue with, and there's 2 new matters that we bring to your attention. The 2 matters which are about financial sustainability and also about dedicated school grant high needs block arrangements and the services and the financial sustainability of those services. Hopefully you'll see from the material in front of you, there's extensive points, action points that we intend to monitor during the year in relation to those 2 new matters, because they are significant for the corporate governance of the organisation. So that's why they're brought before you. That's all I want to say, and I'll take questions.
DSG.
You notice that I've made that, because DSG in itself, as I described previously, is the resources we get for schools, but it's the high needs block that's of concern.
I just like saying DSG, but high need block. I will compliment you on an excellent set of actions and issues. Gave me some very nice nighttime reading, but I've never quite seen anything like this. And I've had a look at other authorities. I've not seen anything like it from any other authority. So I think you should be rightly proud of yourself and your team. So it's an excellent piece of work. I've had a go at trying to do the calculations on the back of this myself. And I work it out to be a reduction of about 30% over 3 years. I'd be interested, I don't think it actually says in here what all of the measures and the actions that you're taking would reduce it by. But I also work out that there would be, hang on, I've lost my own numbers, about, let me just work this back out again. It would increase anyway, about 20% over that 3-year period, but you're reducing it by the growth in the area, but you're reducing it by 30%, so net difference of about 6 to 10%. I'd be interested in what numbers you've come up with, because they're not in here. Thank you.
Yeah, let's have a separate conversation, because I'm assuming you're comparing to the 82 million that's mentioned. And I don't know whether are you comparing the 48 with the 82?
I think so, yes. I've got various different percentages and millions spent in here, so I've had a go to try and work it out.
But overall, like you say, yeah, it's been reduced by more than the increase.
Our intentions are quite clear. This isn't sustainable in terms of the position. You can remember we talked to the point where it's going up exponentially, and even with mitigating actions, then we'll still be in a perilous position. It should the control environment that we're allowed currently to carry forward that resource. So we cannot stay as we are, and that's been made very clear. We are currently developing we had a medium-term financial strategy in relation to the high needs block, and we are we got, I think I mentioned at a previous meeting, we got last minute, we got some additional capital resources, and that will be applied in order to provide for additional services, in order then to also reduce further. So we're refreshing that medium-term financial strategy in light of that. But our intention is quite clear, to reduce the overspend as much as we can, and to reduce and bear down on the cost going forward. So that we're as it says in the document, we're intending to have an all-member seminar on it, so that we've got the visibility about the current status, the plans and consequences as well, so people understand, because at the moment the environment is such that families believe there is only one way to get resources, which is about securing education healthcare plan. So whilst we're battling on that front in terms of people, you know, we've got the condition, the environment is such that we've got an expectation to hit that target within 20 weeks. We achieved that, and if we, without scrutiny and without challenge, we can't afford the outcome of it. So we've got to change the whole system. That is incredibly difficult, and hopefully that comes through, because of the fact that the environment that's been set largely by government is that's how it works. You get an education healthcare plan that unlocks resources and delivers what's needed for children. So yeah, it's doing what we can locally in order to mitigate the consequences of that environment.
Sorry, just to come back on that, actually it's more of a question for Gareth really. How does this compare with what you're seeing elsewhere in terms of the actions? And it's a lengthy set of actions, and it's a massive tool set that Debbie and the team have put together here. How does that compare nationally?
Yeah, it's a good question, Councillor Bluff. So I think we talked at the last committee that this is a major issue across the country, and Doncaster are by no means on their own facing these challenges on the high needs block or the DSG deficit position. The other councils that I deal with have got action plans. Some of them are fortunate enough to be part of the safety valve programme, so I've already received additional funding that has suppose, help their overall position, albeit they are still facing in-year deficits and putting the safety valve funding aside for a second, their underlying position is still worsening, if that makes sense. So I think, you know, obviously Doncaster isn't part of that safety valve funding, and therefore, you know, some of the actions to be taken are perhaps more comprehensive than what I've seen elsewhere. But that, you know, it is, I guess, a reflection of the fact that you've not received that same level of funding that some others have, and therefore your ask and your requirement is greater. And I think it is worth just emphasising again, even if all those actions are delivered, as Debbie and Faye have said, you know, the position is still becoming more challenging going forward, albeit at a slower rate. And I do think, you know, this is something that ultimately needs a national answer, not from Doncaster or, you know, individual authorities, because at the minute, you know, the true nature of the position is slightly kicked down the road until 26-27, and as we spoke at the last committee, you know, whichever party wins the next election, are they really going to stick to that date and potentially place a significant proportion of local authorities into a really, really difficult position by effectively calling that deficit against the general fund? Or, you know, is some form of revised funding, or certainly an extension on that current statutory override after 2027 likely to come in? And, you know, I suspect, you know, answers to that particular issue are probably going to be crystallised post-election by whomever's in charge, I suspect.
Thank you. Can I just add, really from a perspective of a lot of the actions have been identified as part of the Delivering Better Value, which is the next step down from the safety valve. And the feedback from the DFE and through those conversations is that, you know, a lot of the actions are, you know, we're doing, the team, the services are doing, as, you know, all the things that they, you know, they would expect. So there is positive feedback being received as part of that programme, even to the extent, you know, going on, you know, being, you know, speakers at conferences and things like that in terms of the good work that is taking place. So that is really positive, really, in terms of the action.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you for your work, and it's sad that we're in such a position, and so much of your time has to be put into, you know, kind of putting these plans in place to try and keep this part of the service, you know, delivering something given the confines that we find ourselves in. I just hope that, you know, without too many more years going by, we find ourselves in a position where we're managing growth in services rather than a decline. But I'm sure that's agreed by all of us. But yeah, you know, as much as I don't like what we're having to do, I accept it's where we are. So there's no criticism from me.
Yes, I'd like to echo Glenn's earlier comments about the report, the quality of the report and the document that's presented to Audit Committee today. I've got a couple of questions for Peter on this, Pete. So for the record, has the annual governance statement been prepared and presented following the best practice guidance? And does the treatment of the issues also meet with best practice?
Okay, Chair. So there's been no change to the overarching guidance now for several years, and I believe that the relevant bodies are looking at providing sort of fresh guidance. There has been sort of regular technical updates provided, such as around coronavirus and so on and so forth, but the underlying guidance does remain the same. In terms of our application of it, I'm very happy with how we do apply it. We apply it well, and we've actually got a peer group of officers in the surrounding areas that have input into the compilation of the AGS, and I'm more than happy in comparing our arrangements to other ones, Chair, so hopefully that gives you some assurance.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Faye.
Yeah, can I just add as well, I don't know whether this is, we do receive comments in terms of our annual governance statement from the external auditors as well as part of our audit. And in the past, there has been some kind of, you know, some minor tweaks to narrative and things like that. But generally, I think, I don't know whether you wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks, Faye, and if I may, Chair. So absolutely right. It's a key part of our audit work that we'll be undertaking from the summer onwards. There's a couple of points already that not necessary to flag in this meeting that Paminda and I have just been chatting through, which obviously will feed back to relevant officers within the team. But yes, this will be looked at from a point of view of consistency with our knowledge of the council, consistency with the accounts which this will sit alongside, and compliance, obviously, with the requirements of the SIT for Code and good governance. So, Faye's absolutely right. It will be a key part of our audit that's undertaken later this year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Last question, Peter. I've noted in the your following Head of Internal Audit report, which is item 10 on today's agenda, you refer to supporting the preparation of annual governance statement. What involvement have you had in the AGS to do with this, and consequently, are you satisfied? Moved away from the microphone, sorry. Are you satisfied that the AGS properly reflects governance in the City of Doncaster Council?
Thanks, Chair. So, yes, there's a little diagrammatic on the covering report showing the review group meeting that takes place, and I'm part of that, so I'm sort of like a key linkage obviously into the AGS and my own Head of Audit annual report, and that report, the AGS, helps inform my report, and the work of the internal audit team also helps inform the AGS. So I'm happy that they're both consistent, and I believe that alongside this, other reports that we've got going to today's committee, Chair, that they do reflect a picture of good governance in the council.
Thank you, Peter. That's good to hear. I shall move to the recommendations if there are no further questions from colleagues. The committee is asked to review and endorse the outline of the draft annual governance statement prior to it being published for consultation as part of the draft 2023-24 City of Doncaster Council accounts. Is that move, colleagues? Seconded and all agreed. The recommendations are agreed. I will move to item 9, which is the Audit Committee Annual Report 2023-24. Peter, I'll ask Peter to, if he wishes to bring anything to our attention, or if you have anything to add to the report since it was drafted, Peter.
So, Chair, this is your committee's annual report. The main body of the report is basically a factual recount of the work of the committee during the year, and your foreword helps summarise key points and work done by the committee. I think it's over to you, Chair, to sort of add any further context you want.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, the report is a positive one. It represents the work carried out by the Audit Committee over the year and demonstrates the positive impacts that we have achieved. I'll refer to a couple of areas. The achievements are noted in my foreword. Firstly, there's the excellent Auditor's Annual Report. That's the external Auditor's Report. And the committee continues to request officers to attend Audit Committee meetings during the year to provide additional information on specific areas of concern. And I think we've mentioned that this morning regarding breaches and waivers, if the need is necessary. Such items during the last year were the taxi licensing and the CYPF, Children, Young People and Families Commissioning Arrangements. I was going to say, do any members wish to make any comments or suggestions, having read the report and my foreword to it? And if you want to give support, does it feel right, given the reports we've considered as an audit committee over the year?
I think the photograph does you some justice, Chair.
I've just got a brief question. Yeah. So We're on item 9. It is 9.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Just in terms of just in terms of the audit improvement plan, and we also the completing actions in terms of reference review. Is that the one we went through at a previous audit committee?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Am I looking at the right table? In Appendix B, the terms of reference review. What's? Can you just remind me what's that referring to?
This is the annual.
Yeah. Okay. So in 2022, SIPFA produced some revised guidance for audit committees, and one of the actions that we identified as part of the effectiveness review carried out in March 2023 was to make sure that our terms of reference reflected the model terms of reference that SIPFA were putting forward. And so basically we revised the terms of reference, and they were agreed at full council in May 2023, so the action's completed. There's some minor changes being looked at as part of the annual review process, and those will be put through to you in due course.
And that's what I thought it was. So just in terms of also the changes to the way in the Institute of Internal Audit would like us to structure internal audit going forward, does that have any impact on this at all?
I'm sure it will, but as yet we haven't got any guidance or application notes given how that's going to impact on the public sector internal audit standards. And then what we're expecting from there is there's an application note. So those are due out later on during this this year. I think they're talking around about September time, but there are often delays in getting these out. Once those are available, we can review how those impact on the terms of reference for this audit committee.
No further questions or comments, colleague? I'll read out the recommendation within the report.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to say, for me, I think it's a really good paper, is this, but it probably undersells the work of the finance team in terms of the accounts production and the audited timetable of those accounts. So I think we made reference in our ISA 260 that you were, I think, part of about 30% of councils that prepared your accounts last year on time, and you were probably in nationally probably about 10% of councils that were signed off by the end of the calendar year. And obviously your VFM audit was completed in January. So I think it's touched on slightly in here, but I wouldn't underplay that given the national state of accounts and VFM audits that are outstanding. And, you know, we're not talking about a small district here, you know, a big metropolitan city council now. I think that was a real achievement on all sides. And obviously the audit committee played a role in that in terms of holding Faye and team and myself and Parinda to account throughout that year. So I'd probably make a stronger point of that. And when, you know, if you're presenting this to full council, Chair, I think that's a really key thing to say because, you know, you're clearly in a minority that had draft accounts and audited accounts and a VFM audit done to the timetable that it was. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to support that. It definitely needs to be noted and definitely needs to be raised at full council about the financial team's input. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Gareth. And I think as an audit committee, we do recognise the work done by the financial team and the work carried out by Grant Thornton, and we have noted that in our previous meetings and more the relevant meetings to the financial situation and the enviable position that we must be in from other authorities. Faye, sorry.
Just going to echo that, and I was just going to say, in what is quite a serious meeting, quite often we don't see a lot of smiles. It was nice to see some smiles from across the other side, having been complimented on the work, and yeah, so that brought a little bit of joy to the room, which is not always easy to find. Thank you.
I was just going to say thank you for all the comments on behalf of myself and the team. I say it's the team that do the work. They are fantastic, and as you say, it's a priority. So if the committee wishes, I'll take that as an action away to update that narrative really, incorporating some of the feedback really, and then when we look at publishing the report, because it is published on the website, etc., we'll publish an updated version with further information in terms of that.
Yes, please, Rep. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the goalposts have been changing over the years, and dates have been brought forward and forward and forward. And I think it's fair to say that we've never failed to meet those dates, and we've been successful in doing that. Every time the bar's been raised, we've met it. And it's like Scott was saying earlier about getting to the top of the mountain. We don't want to come back down, but I feel we are at the top of the mountain. We do very well. The teams produces excellent work, and we meet, and obviously that is recognised by Grant Thornton. So again, and I always do say, and I think with colleagues' support, that we do recognise that work carried out, Debbie and Faye, by the financial team under your direction.
I guess it's the point isn't just about what the team do, which is incredible. It's the fact that the environment we're operating in is increasingly more complex, and the resources, again, making that point again, the resources both that we have and that the external audit have diminished, and that means that there's more acuity in terms of sort of delivering with that within the timescales. So it's not just that the job's harder; it's actually that there's less people, and there's that means that there's it's been increasingly harder, because effectively I think Grant Thornton, we haven't had this conversation with the team, but they will have prioritised us because they know that we're competent and we can deliver on time, that actually that the resources that they've directed resources accordingly. So the fact that we've been able to meet those more stringent timescales and provide quality paperwork to support the reasons for, because that's a lot of this is about why assumptions are being made or why decisions are being made in terms of final accounts. Because we've got the backup behind that, they've had the confidence to actually resource and because they could be working elsewhere. So it's all of that, and I don't think most people don't understand that that's been the environment over the last 4 years that we've been operating in. When COVID hit and we started working remotely, and then thereafter, that's been the challenge, I guess, at the same time as trying to do an awful lot more.
Fair to say that both Gareth and Perminder have commented on the quality of the documents and the papers presented to them by Faye's team. Yeah. Okay, colleagues, I'll move on to the recommendation that the committee is asked to make comment on and consider for approval the Audit Committee Annual Report 2023-24. Move seconded, colleagues, and agreed. Thank you. The recommendation is agreed. I'll move on to item 10, which is the Annual Report of the Head of Internal Audit 2023-24. We'll take the reports as read, so I'll ask Peter, Head of Internal Audit, if he wishes to bring anything specific to members' attention, or you want to add anything to the report since it was drafted, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to give a little bit of context around my annual report, it's very similar to the last 2 years, which is really good in that I'm able to give a positive opinion over the Council's risk governance and control arrangements. I've been assessing this as the year progressed and hope to be able to do this. It's a very important assurance for committee after what's still being another very challenging year. And I think it's credit to the culture and tone from the top in being a well-managed and governed organisation. You'll note a spike in year-end overdue management actions, this covered within the report. The serious points of concern raised this year are for the climate change governance arrangements and taxi licensing. There's a fair bit of commentary in the report around our data-driven work, which forms quite a significant part of our plan for the next year and coming years. And the report concludes with a lot of narrative setting out how I've built up my opinion over risk governance and control arrangements. So that's the strong assurance base that we set off with the year from, followed by lots of positive assurance reports as the years progressed, lots of different assurances over the risk element, same with governance and control elements. And on that basis, I'm able to provide a full, unqualified, positive opinion over these arrangements. Nothing further to update on the actual report, the numbers in it or anything like that, Chair, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. I have no questions because the report is what I was expecting, given the updates we've received during the year as a committee. There's no surprises and there's lots of assurances for the Audit Committee, but colleagues may wish to...
Just had one comment, which is an area that I'm involved in, which is taxi licensing. As the chair of taxi licensing, I'm confident that progress is being made and I'm being kept abreast of that, and I'm confident that you know, the directors and head of service are progressing appropriately and at the right pace to be able to deliver a positive report to us in January 2025. Peter might have a different view, but I think he'd probably echo that. But that's a personal area of interest, obviously, as chair of licensing that I'm aware of.
Thank you, David.
Yes, Chair, I'd echo those sentiments. There's been considerable progress made in this area. There's still a lot of work to be done. We did receive a progress report at the 1st of February's Audit Committee this year, and there will be what will hopefully be a final update report delivered to January 25's Audit Committee to basically for us to see the job through.
Thank you, Peter. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just regarding the 6 items related to place that are overdue, I'm assuming they're the ones related to change governance arrangements. Could you just explain a little bit in a bit more detail what that relates to and how long have they been overdue?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of narrative around why there's been such a noticeable spike, and I'm attributing some of that to be the fact that we've collated the figures post 31st of March. So what we had in previous years is we've collated the figures before the end of the year end, and there would have inevitably been a number of actions that fell due as at the 31st of March, but we weren't reporting them as being overdue because at the point we collated them, they hadn't been. Yeah. But with the later reporting deadlines that we've been able to put in place this year, we have taken into account any actions that fell due at the 31st of March, and that has captured all 7 of the climate change governance arrangements, 6 of which are high level and 1 of which is a lower level action. So that covers off all of those actions. They were all due as at the 31st of March. There's still been some considerable work carried out in all of these areas. There's progress against every one of these actions. And management are still currently confident that they're going to get these actions over the line for the 30th of June deadlines that they've had an agreed revised deadline given for, and they are providing an update report scheduled for the 25th of July's Audit Committee this year. So things are on track. We are keeping a very close watching brief on that with a weekly / fortnightly catch-up meeting to make sure that there is progress being maintained in that area.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, do they continue to be high risk, or have some actions been taken to reduce the residual risk here?
Good point. I think if we wanted to put a bit of context into that and reassess those, I think that probably with the ongoing work that's taken place, we could possibly downgrade those. But whether I need to do that or not, if we actually get them over the line and get them all completed, then I won't need to sort of have to assess whether we need to lower them or not at this point. It will be done for the next progress report if they're not all fully complete. But as I say, I'm hoping that they are going to be.
Colleagues, anything further for Peter? Okay. I'll now read out the recommendations within the report. The committee has asked 1. Note the internal audit annual report for 2023-24, including confirmation that the council's governance, risk management and control arrangements were adequate and operated effectively during the year. And 2. Note the head of internal audit self-assessment that the service is compliant with public sector internal audit standards, maintaining the outcome from the external quality assessment carried out during the 2021-22 year, which confirmed the highest level of conformance with the relevant public sector internal audit standards. Is that moved and seconded, colleagues? Thank you, and all agreed. Now the recommendations are noted. I'll move on to item 11, which is the counter-fraud activity report. Then we'll take the report as read. It says that it mentions Nikki here, but it's going to be yourself, Peter, presenting the report. So do you wish to bring anything to our attention, or is there anything added to the report since it was drafted?
Just a very quick summary, Chair. So this is the 3rd year that this report's been produced. It sets out the key fraud risk areas that the Council faces and what forms of assurance we have over these. And then it sets out the counter-fraud plan that sits within the overall audit plan for the team for the next year, which is the next agenda item, Chair. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Questions on this report, colleagues? No? No? Just one. Could I ask for your opinion on the assessments made within this document, Peter, regarding the adequacy of our arrangements? That's the City of Doncaster Council's arrangement.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy with the assessments in there. They are very similar to the assessments that we've put through in the previous couple of years. They've been updated with regards any sort of activity that we're aware of on both a local or national level. So yes, I'm happy with the assessments that we've got in the report, Chair.
Thank you, that's good to hear, Peter. I'll read out the recommendations contained within the report. The committee is asked to support and approve the counter-fraud plan and the assurance map, which details all the proposed activities to fraud risks. Colleagues, is that moved? Seconded? And all agreed. Thank you very much. The report recommendation is agreed. We'll move on to item 12, the internal audit plan 2024-25, taking the report as read by colleagues on the audit committee. Peter, can I ask you as head of internal audit if you wish to bring any specific items to members' attention, or if you wish to add anything to the report since it was drafted? Peter.
Probably just to affirm a few points, Chair. So the agenda, this agenda item sets out our plan of work for the next year in appendices A, B and C. This has been produced following a lot of work by my team to ensure that we're looking at the right areas known at this point in time. And there's plenty of detail within the report setting out the steps that we've taken to achieve that. The report also highlights, as you know, that we keep the plan fluid throughout the year so that we can deal with any new and emerging risks and so that changes can and will be made as the year progresses. It also highlights the realignment exercise that's been undertaken so far this year within the team, and that's generated additional capacity for us to deliver ever more complex work, help deliver our data-driven work, and we've got the ongoing recruitment for a trainee auditor post, which I'm hoping is going to bear us some fruit going forward. They're going to be doing an Institute of Internal Auditor qualification with career progression to hopefully encourage retention within the team. I've been outlining for at least the last 2 years the recruitment difficulty we've experienced, and you know for other discussions that this is the same in other areas of the council as well as other teams locally and nationally, and as experienced by the external audit markets as well, Chair. So hopefully these arrangements are going to help us going forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions for Peter on this report? Anyone? I'm not going to let you get away that easily, Peter. So you mentioned the realignment exercise that's been undertaken. Are you satisfied now that this gives you sufficient skills and capacity to deliver the obligations of the internal audit team? And I've seen that I'm the only one with questions. I'll ask you the second one as well. And this new approach that you're setting out, how does that compare with other local authority internal audit teams? I don't know if you know that answer at all, but I just wondered if there was any similarities.
With regards to the realignment exercise, Chair, yes, I'm happy very much with how it's going, and it allows us to prioritise the skills and experience that we have within the team to the key areas that they need to work on. With regards the trainee, as I say, it's allowing us to grow our own in the absence of a readily available market of experienced auditors. And I guess in conjunction with your second question, yes, that is similar to how other local authorities are trying to deal with the same issue that we've got, and they're also going down the apprentice recruitment route. It's going to provide us going forward with a structure whereby we can bring people in at the sort of learning end of the team and take them through into a senior auditor post, and that's hopefully going to bring about a retention, which is what we're clearly looking for, because it's a big investment of our team's time in bringing somebody from no knowledge or very little, say, to being a very competent auditor. It also allows, because of the career grading that we've got, Chair, for somebody that does already have some experience to be able to come in at a midpoint perhaps. So it gives us a lot of flexibility going forward. So yeah, in summary, I'm happy with the arrangements that we've got in place, and I guess that's the key question that you always ask me, to make sure that I've got sufficient skills and resources within the team to be able to deliver the work that we're doing. And alongside that, we're looking at the training to help develop the existing staff that we've got. So maybe look at increasing the fraud qualifications that we've got. Do we get other people going through Institute of Internal Auditors? Do we need further data analyst training to be delivered within the team as well? So I'm really trying to sort of like future-proof the work of the team, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. That's interesting, and I'm sure I echo we got support from the audit committee in your plans, and maybe it's something that in other directors they may be looking at, this sort of career grade, as I would call it, to adopt for recruitment. Yes, Sue.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Peter, for your report. Really nice piece of work as well. But it's great that you're adopting the apprenticeship schemes. And I think it's vital, like I say, having homegrown staff and whatnot that we can keep tighter control over, and et cetera, et cetera. But can we have a look at also other departments what are adopting this, and, if we can measure it, and if they're not adopting it, why they're not adopting it, what barriers are stopping them, for this apprenticeship scheme to flourish. Thank you.
We're an award-winning apprenticeship employer. The Mayor put some resources in, not last year's budget, the year before. So this is on top of the apprenticeship levy. We already had resources in the core budget that's held by HR to support like MVQ training and that sort of thing. We had the apprenticeship levy, and then on top of that was because one of the barriers that people were finding, that it wasn't just about providing resources for the training. It was about having, I'm going to call them supernumerary staff, because we need, a bit like Pete's describing, you need a team, because you've got, in the instance of Pete's team, it's really quite a small team, and you need them all on top of your game in terms of delivering products. So there isn't necessarily the luxury of bringing somebody through. The apprentice, the monies that was provided and approved as part of that budget enabled the additionality, and that's been targeted over the last 18 months. We didn't spend it all in the first instance, but the combination of the National Graduate Scheme that we have, and so that there's a number of initiatives what I'm describing, which means that we have got, I'm going to say something like 20% of the workforce. It's a phenomenal figure, undertaking all across the board, not just young people, but people who have been in the job for some time and want to make sure that they've got the right, for the qualifications, mature students, in terms of the MVQ levels, as well as people who are wanting to retrain as well into other roles. So that is why we've got an award-winning apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a comment, if I may, as someone who spends most of the time trying to support young and not so young people to develop their careers. So it's really impressive to see an organisation that puts the resources and the time in, as Peter said, to bringing people through. Just by way of a question, if I may, Austin, clearly huge benefit to the wider professions here, not least the finance and accounting profession. There are some organisations that might prey upon other organisations like Doncaster Council that spend that time and effort growing those people. Do we take any steps to, I suppose, not retain the people that we grow, but I'm thinking here of, I think the phrase, is it golden handcuffs? So do we put anything in? No, we don't. Okay.
It's anti-competitive, and effectively, there's, from a legal point of view, we've been advised that we cannot do that. So there are, I think, there is informal arrangements, so that I think there's usually a compact, which is a different arrangement, effectively, that people have signed up to, but you cannot have a contract that effectively says that if you receive this training, you've got to stay with the entity. What the view I take is we're part of a bigger fraternity. I've worked in a number of authorities. I received my training in Wakefield, and Doncaster's getting the benefit of now over a much longer time, I would say. So I think we are spending lots of time creating the right conditions for people to want to stay, rather than legally compelling them to do so. So staff networks, about creating the right environment that people want to be part of this outfit in terms of being successful, rather than contractually obliging them to. So I think it's the HR spending, as well as managers, just creating the right culture and willing and desire to stay here and develop, rather than, but actually, as I say, also seen as we reap the rewards of other people's training and development, because there will be staff coming in at a different level that also contribute to our endeavours as well. So it's a bit of quid pro quo.
Faye, you wanted to come?
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, I think it's a great opportunity. It's something me and Pete have talked about for a long time in terms of the apprenticeship. So I'm really pleased that we're finally at the stage, and it is a progression. So that is fantastic. If someone starts and they can develop, they can get the training. So I'm really excited. I really hope we're able to appoint. And if you know anybody that's interested, please, give them a little nudge to apply, because it's a really brilliant opportunity. And other teams that are doing a lot in terms of apprenticeships are our digital and ICT team. They took on 5 recently, and the positive comments from the individuals, it's absolutely fantastic to hear, really, in terms of they're doing brilliant. And it is about, we need to create those conditions where they do want to stay, they want to learn, they want to, thrive as part of, working for the City of Doncaster Council. So that's the aim. So I'm really pleased. So yeah, if you know anybody, push it.
Just as a final comment on this, Chair, we've actually engaged with colleagues in communications team and the actual apprentices there, and they've helped make us get a really big reach out in terms of the recruitment exercise. And I didn't think I'd ever be saying this, but we've even got an advert going out on TikTok as well as the other social accounts. So we're really hopeful that we're going to get a really good person to help us take the team forward. And in terms of the retention and competitive side of things, we don't actually, because other teams in the area are actually also recruiting, going down this line as well, there's not as much competitiveness, hopefully.
It is next time we meet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of covered off that really a little bit around the social media. I think that as you all know, I'm kind of not easy on us, but equally so I'm really proud to be part of this council. And we all get involved in social media, and I find it quite upsetting, really. Quite upsetting for our staff, the level of uneducated criticism, shall I say. I don't mean people are stupid. I mean they're just not knowledgeable about what we deliver and how we have to deliver in the confines. And it was just to make that point, really, that we should continue to be positive about the authority and push that message out, so we can, so it can be a place where young people aspire to work, rather than sort of buying into the kind of more negative narrative of the local authority. So I'm pleased to hear that we're embracing, kind of things like TikTok and I'm sure Instagram, and I know we do Twitter and various things. And while it may seem, kind of one of those sorts of things that is not really important, it really is important to not just young people, but specifically some areas young people, and engaging them, because that talent the town will lose, and we have got talent. So just a positive, really. I'm pleased to hear that we are promoting the council in that positive light, because I do hate to see some of the things. I think people are working really hard in this building. If they read some of the comments I read, I don't know how they manage to kind of get themselves to work sometimes with the amount of negativity. So that was all I really wanted to say about it.
Okay, Glenn.
Just a quick one from me. I'm obviously very positive about this. We've had this conversation before. I think it's great. I have seen the advert on social media. It came up in one of my feeds. It's a nice, decent salary, strong salary. So I think it's very competitive with the other apprenticeships that are out there. But I do look forward to the video of you then, Peter.
No, thank you about with that. But can we have the advert sent to all councillors so we can share it? You know what I mean? Because this is a very good news story, isn't it? You know what I mean? Let like Dave said, let's sing our praises. And all your hard work. Thank you.
That's real.
Okay, colleagues, I'll read out the recommendation within the report. The committee is asked to support the principles and strategy underpinning the 2024-25 internal audit plan set out in section 1 and expanded upon in section 7 of the internal audit plan report, and approve the plan as set out in appendices A, B and C. So is that moved, colleagues? Seconded and agreed. So all agreed, the recommendation is agreed. Thank you for that. We'll move on to item 13, which is External Auditor Grant Thornton, Audit Plan 2023-24 and arrangements for the preparation of the 2023-24 accounts. All members will have read the report, so I'll ask Gareth Mills and Perminder Setti from Grant Thornton if they wish to bring any specific issues to members' attention or have anything to add since the report was drafted. Gareth, Perminder?
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the plan. Obviously, taking it as read as you said. Just a few things, I guess, to pull out on pack page 143, headed up Introduction and Headlines, Significant Risks. And these are, I suppose, the key salient points of the overall plan. So the plan for 23-24 accounts audit and VFM audit, discussed and agreed with Faye and her team at the beginning of last week. The plan includes the key areas of focus for our accounts audit, which are in line with the prior year. So the first one around management overrider controls, that's a standard significant risk across all audit plans, across all sectors, those areas where there's the potential for management to manipulate the accounts through estimate and judgments. Not that we're saying that's happening here at Doncaster, Chair, to be clear, but it is an area that all auditors are focusing on. And then I guess the two areas of your balance sheet that are potentially subject to a number of assumptions and fluctuations around your share of the South Yorkshire Pension Fund, and which is again expected to be in a net surplus position for this year, as it was for the first time in the prior year. And there was a lot of debate and discussion with Faye and her team around accounting for that. So hopefully that should be more part of the norm for this year's audit, because it was genuinely new territory here at Doncaster and indeed at a number of other audits last year. And then in terms of the valuation of your estate or your land and buildings, including council dwellings, and again, members of the committee will be familiar with the level of work that both the council, your valuer, our expert valuer and ourselves go into in that particular area, given that's the current area of focus, certainly of our regulators, in terms of the work that's done in that particular area. The group audit obviously will be included again this year. Again, it should be more straightforward than what we experienced last year when the Children's Trust was brought back in-house and absorbed sort of partway through the year. So that's no longer an issue, and it's just yourselves and St Ledger Homes as part of the group. Materiality is in line with last year. It's currently based on your 22-23 accounts. We will update that in the summer on receipt of your draft accounts, but at present we're planning for around about 11.5 million in line with last year's audit. Clearly, if we do find any issues, adjustments or errors just above $500,000, we'll include that in our ISA 260 report later this year. VFM work is obviously a key element of our work as well alongside the accounts. So once again, we'll be doing a review of your arrangements across the three themes of financial sustainability, governance, the 3 E's, or effectively your performance management and objectives and KPIs. There will be areas of focus within that in terms of financial outturn, the MTFS, the arrangements in place around the airport lease, and then clearly a focus on the key issue that we flagged up in last year's VFM audit around the DSG position. Obviously, we've had quite a bit of discussion on that already this morning, Chair. In terms of logistics, so our planning work commenced last month, just finalising 1 or 2 things now. I think I'd describe ourselves in a good position as we sort of pause our local government planning and commence our NHS audit work over the next couple of months. The team is myself and Perminder, a lot of consistency at the level below that, and we reintroduce a colleague, Wes Kellingray, who worked on this audit a couple of years ago and in the years previous to that, so he's familiar with a number of Faye's team and the systems and processes here at Doncaster, so it was good to get Wes back on the team when, unfortunately, jumping back to the previous discussion, one of our sort of rising stars decided to move away from public sector audit, Angus, and into a different field. The audit is planned to commence in July, Chair, and run through to the end of the year. We're proposing to bring our ISA 260 report on the accounts to an audit committee in November. I know currently there's one scheduled for the end of October. I've had some discussions with Faye about the possibility of moving that one back to November, Chair. And that's really no reflection whatsoever on Faye or the team or you as a council. It's mainly around the impact of the old year audits around the country and the current consultation that's out at the moment that essentially issues a backstop or a guillotine date for the end of September for any old audits that are not completed by that date. So as a firm, obviously the guillotine per se doesn't affect you because your accounts are all up to date, as we've mentioned before. And with the exception of one audit, all my audits in Yorkshire are also up to date. However, nationally, that is not the picture. So as a firm, we've done an assessment on those old year audits, ones that are just never going to be delivered and are going to have to be backstopped, and ones that are reasonably deliverable by the end of September, and therefore are going to be the focus of work that's been ongoing since the start of this year to try and get those concluded by the end of September. What that means is that the team that we've got on the Doncaster audit is also involved in an old year audit. So whilst there are elements of the Doncaster audit that we will be doing in the summer, the bulk of that team's time is going to be directed onto an old year audit to ensure that that one is concluded by September. And then that sort of split will change, and the team will then be obviously focused on concluding Doncaster by the end of the calendar year, and with a view to bringing an ICE 260 to a committee towards the end of November and then signing off in December as per last year. The only final point I'll probably flag on that page, Chair, is the fee, and obviously the proposed fee is essentially double the prior year fee. Again, that's largely in line with the new PSAA contract, and there's a whole host of reasons why audit fees have increased significantly for this first year of the new audit contract. A lot of which we talked about before and are set out in the Redmond review and the sustainability of the sector. And I'm sure if there are any questions on the fee, happy to answer them. So I'll pause at that point, Chair, and say overall we're pleased with where the audit is at present. A good relationship continues with Faye and also with Scott as monitoring officer and Damien as chief exec. So there's regular meetings with the sort of three key statutory post holders that myself and Perminda have, and the team's in place ready to pick up this work again once our NHS audits are concluded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Does any member wish to speak on this item? Glenn?
Thanks very much, Gareth. So thank you for taking us through that first page, in particular the fees. So just to pick up on that, so my calculations may be slightly off here, but I looked at the PSSA guidelines, and in 2020, partner, director level, we were paying 1,056 per day, and now it's 3,312 per day, so a tripling of the day rate. Obviously, it's an hourly rate on the PSSA site. Now, I did some calculations. Originally, the fee last year was meant to be 150,000, I understand, and it ended up overrunning to 222. Is that right? So I calculate that to be around about 300 days worth of work, whereas this year the fee's about 445,000, which I calculate to be about somewhere in the region, depending on what resources you use, probably about 500 days worth of work. So it's not clear on here how many days worth of work are actually involved, but that kind of goes against what we were saying. I understand Faye's team put a lot of effort in producing these financials. From what I understand, they're some of the best in the country, but Faye and her team. So why is it such a big increase? Obviously, I understand the increase in rates from the PSSA, but what about the increase in number of days for the work if they're doing such a good job in preparing it?
So I think there's a few things to say about the fee. I mean, the fees have increased significantly this year. But if you rewind sort of 15, 20 years and then applied inflation from that point, I would say that 4-5 figure is certainly in line and could well be actually below what you were paying at that point 15, 20 years ago. And I think linked to that, you know, the sustainability of the external audit market under the old contract was in significant jeopardy. So a number of firms had expressed that they were not permitted to rebid under the new contract. So you've had people like Deloitte leaving the market, and there were significant issues in terms of recruitment and retention into external audit, similar to what Pete has been mentioning for internal audit. These were all set out in the Redmond review and also in a GT report from last year called About Time, both of which I think we've circulated to members of this committee. So I think there was a feeling that in order to sustain the market, those fees needed to start to move in a more sustainable direction. Otherwise, you know, commercial firms would basically leave the market, and you know, new entrants into the market would not be interested. Now, those fees have increased significantly, absolutely, and you know, some new entrants have joined the market. KPMG have come back in after an absence of 5 years, for example, to try and give more sustainability to the market. And essentially, you know, the scale fee that's been set for Doncaster is that which was set by PSAA following the tender process. So, you know, it's difficult for me to talk too much around the scale fee, and obviously that was off the back of a very competitive process that PSAA ran. In terms of the number of days that you've calculated it, you know, in essence, I suppose as a firm, you know, we will deliver the right level of quality for this audit in the timescale that we believe is deliverable, irrespective of number of days, if that makes sense, Councillor Bluff. So, you know, we've got to hit a required level of audit quality, and to be fair, and again, just to make clear, as a team, we've been subject to 4 FRC reviews of our files of our Yorkshire audits, all of which have gone very well, which should give you the assurance that the level of audit quality and the level of detail we're going into is of this appropriate requirement. So we will ultimately deliver, you know, this audit on the basis of the number of days that it takes to hit that potential quality, that quality threshold in a timescale that I think is achievable and realistic. So, you know, I appreciate, you know, there is a significant increase on that, but in the context of, you know, where audit fees were 15, 20 years ago, I think it's still comparable, if not lower than you were probably paying at that point.
Thanks very much, Gareth. And I do agree that some years ago, audit fees were out of step with the rest of the market for local councils, but I think that is quite a significant increase, and I'm sure many of our residents will probably look at whether or not we're getting value for money for that. So I don't know when we can review the PSA, but I think that amount, the current day rate's a little bit extreme. But I'd be interested to know Faye's comment about, in terms of the effort, that I would have expected your effort from your team would reduce the amount of work that Grant Thornton needed to do.
I think our team do the work that we need to do to be able to provide the working papers we need to complete the accounts. I think it's for Gareth to undertake how much work he needs from an external audit perspective. So I'm probably difficult for me to comment really from their perspective. We try and do as much as we can and to help and facilitate, and we do have a good working relationship. So I think, yeah.
I think just to add to that, I mean, there are, reviews taking place at the moment to try and increase the number of players in this particular market. So at the moment, it's quite a high barrier to entry for any firms wanting to deliver public sector audit in a local authority market. Hence why there's, with KPMG coming back in, is essentially, the vast majority of the market is ourselves, Mazars, KPMG and EY, well over 90% of it. And not everybody can put their name to a set of NHS or local government accounts. You've got to be accredited by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales to get what's known as your CAP status, your Key Audit Partner status. And in order to do that, you've got to demonstrate a lot of experience in public sector audit. So even within the big firms, there's only a handful of people that can actually lead these audits. Now, there is talk of the ICAW and the FRC getting together to try and alter those barriers, but certainly at present, that's not really an option. So, there's only a small number of people that can do this particular work, and that's one of the things that people are looking into now as to whether that can be expanded in any way in the future. In terms of where the fees are going to go and feedback to PSEA, this is a first year of a 5-year contract, so it may be difficult to alter that over the next 5 years, but there'll certainly be another procurement round in 4 years' time, which may generate a different answer. The other thing as well is that the level of granularity and detail that we go into on these audits, is significantly in excess of what we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And, another thing that's been looked at, and again, we've touched on this in previous audit committees, is the level of, well, firstly, management resource, and secondly, audit resource, focusing on the valuation of your schools and council buildings, land, etc., and your share of the pension fund balance. Are they the most efficient areas for this audit to focus on when ultimately whatever happens in those areas is not going to affect phase MTFS going forward? Now, there are ways to slightly change that, particularly on land and building valuations. Without getting too technical, they could be valued on a different basis than what the SIPFA code currently requires them to be valued on, which could be a more straightforward way of doing it, but that's not the way the code is at the minute. So again, that may change in the future, but as things stand, that's one of the reasons why the audit goes into quite a lot of detail and takes quite a lot of time to complete.
Faye, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know Grant Thornton have done a lot of work in terms of, working with other bodies in terms of the amount of work and the value added. And I think just to continue to support that conversation and that, that focus to actually reduce that work on the valuation. Because like you say, actually, we know it's important from a perspective, but in terms of the amount of work from a finance team, from external audit team, the more we can kind of actually reduce that, the better. So I think if we can continue having those conversations in where we need to reduce the work, and then that would reduce the fees as well, then I think that would be positive.
Dave, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just sort of carry this on. I think that we all accept that, the level of detail now, that the expectation level of detail has increased massively, and the costs are increasing, and there's market forces, and there's all those things. I think Glyn's point, and it's one that I don't think is fully answered. I mean, with the exception of Glyn, we are lay people. Glyn is, audit is his bag. But we have to, part of our role is to ensure, value for money for the taxpayer. So, if Gareth, you can give us some kind of broad feel why there is such a increase in the number of days required. I mean, it might be that you say, well, actually, we were undercharging prior in that we put more days in and therefore we've just kind of rebalanced it. Or it may be that you go, well, actually, there's these aspects of the work now, there's an expectation that we do this, this and this now. I don't want terrible, depth of detail, just to get a feel for why there's such a significant increase in the number of days required, just so we can be comfortable in our own minds that it's not just about market forces allowing for an increase because of supply and demand.
So the probably, well, there is an element of the audit fees, even with the fee variations that were included in the sort of latter half of the last PSAA contract, did underplay the level of audit work that was being delivered by external audit firms, not just Grant Thornton, but for those audit firms that were delivering local authorities accounts under the old contract. There is an element of that. I think in terms of the total number of days, the 430k scale fee that has been set by PSAA, and they've set those scale fees across the country without direct input from external audit firms. In essence, they've done run a procurement process. The firms have submitted an overall bid as part of that, and then a different percentage of the market has been awarded off the back of those firms submitting those bids, and PSAA have calculated scale fees off the back of that. The sort of daily scale fees that's been highlighted are generally for things in excess of the scale fee. So if, for example, we were required to do an extra piece of work here at Doncaster that had not currently been planned for, we would need to discuss that with FAE, discuss it with you as an audit committee, and then we'd need to go and submit that to PSAA as a sort of a supplementary fee. And the number of days taken for that would be on the basis of the scale fees that Councillor Bluff quoted. I think the other thing as well, just to touch on, is that that there is an expectation that the more experienced members of the audit teams play a stronger or more significant role than we did in the past. So, managers, senior managers like Perminda, directors like myself, our portfolios, our span of control has reduced under this new contract to reflect the level of detailed work that's been required. But therefore, the proportion of the more senior experienced time on audits under the new contract will be higher than it was under the old PSA contract. And obviously, the likes of Wes, Perminda and myself are at a higher rate than more junior colleagues.
I can buy into all that. I kind of get all that. That's just bear with me. As I say, we're lay people, and you give a sort of quite a technical description there. So where you lost me was after the point where you said, well, actually, probably we were doing more work than we were getting paid for prior. So there's a bit of an uplift because we were probably underestimating the amount of work. So I kind of see, there's a potential for a percentage increase in days, because it's not the argument over the day charge or the level of skill or whatever. It's quite a simple mathematical equation. I'm a builder by trade, and I look at a job and say, well, how many days? And I say, well, it's this amount of days, and man days, and da-di-da-di-da. Now, I appreciate that might be a simplistic view. As, someone who's taken a simplistic view, what I would like you to do is to explain to me in a simplistic way why, putting all the other calculations aside, the seniority of the people working, why it is about an increase in days. For example, you said, well, we are having more, these amount of hours are going to be dealt with at a senior level. So that fee is going to be greater for those hours. I don't like the idea that all that's buried somehow in this increase in days. So what I'm trying to seek to understand is, beyond the fact that you may have been not charging for enough time previously, what is the workload that's increasing that increases the days rather than the day fee related to the seniority of the staff? Is that a better way of putting it? Does that help in any way?
Thanks, Councillor Shorts. I suppose the easiest way of saying it is that the PSAA scale fee that has been set for the City of Doncaster does not define the days, it defines the fee. So that in that sense, you know, this is the fee for Doncaster. We've set it as an independent body, and that it is what it is, essentially.
Would Faye and Debbie, do you both want to come in at this point and add to the debate?
Just go on PSA website. There's a spreadsheet that tells you how, just basically the fee that's relating to your council. Well, you're quickly scanning up and down it. What it looks like, there's a relationship between the scale of the organisation and the fee, and that's the only information. So I think, because in the past it feels like a bit of deja vu, because we had a similar sort of conversation in an audit committee some time ago. They tell us what the rate is, and it is as it is. And so I'm just looking at Barnsley's councils. Barnsley Council, it's 371,400. That's it, it's a figure. So the day allocation is a bit of red herring. Yeah.
The one thing that Councillor Bluff raised is that's the daily rate for anything subsequently that an auditor thinks is over and above what is part of the normal audit. So the 430k covers your accounts and your VFM audit. If we were to do something additional and we were permitted to do it under the ethical standards in terms of independence and all the rest of it, and it took X number of days, the day rates that Councillor Bluff quoted would be what we would be proposing to FAE and to PSAA. But we're not anticipating anything of that nature, certainly not this year. So yes, PSAA have basically allocated each council that was part of that procurement an audit fee for 23-24, and they've just quoted the fee.
Right. That is all quite clear to me now. That's absolutely fine from my point of view. Thank you for that.
Faye, you wanted to add something earlier.
Thank you, yeah. So I was just going to explain earlier in terms of, so the 150,000 scale fee that was quoted in the other document, what the PSAA have done is they've added changes in audit requirements, so an adjustment for the VFM arrangements, which we've talked about before, have increased. So that added an extra 23,500 to arrive at 171. And then, as we're saying, as part of the procurement, there's been an uplift of 151%. So then that adds 259. So to arrive at the scale fee for 23-24, which is the 430. So that's the information that we've had, you know, through the PSAA, the procurement, and in terms of that's the process we all agreed at full council to sign up to because of the reasons that we outlined at that meeting. So that's kind of given an update in terms of the calculation. I think the other thing I just wanted to mention as well, previously in terms of the increase in work, we as a council, we did receive a specific grant from government in terms of the external audit work, and I can't remember exactly what, I'm sure it's between 60 and 70,000 for the extra work. There is potentially a question in terms of actually now that audit fees have increased by 151%, actually are they going to go back and review the grant that was allocated? So just to kind of mention that as well.
Thanks for that. It'd be nice if we can apply for additional funding to meet that revised fee. Yes, Gary.
Yeah, so as Faye said, I think it was 15 million that that DLUC allocated to all local authorities that were part of the PSAA process for the last 3 years of the old contract. And as Faye said, for Doncaster, that worked out between 60 and 70k, which was pretty much in line with our fee variation from the 150 to the 222 that was actually levied in terms of prior year. So, if that was continued, obviously it would need to be a bigger fee than 15 million, but that principle might be something that, you know, Section 151 of officers across the country or the Society for Municipal Treasurers may wish to, I suppose, raise with DLUC as a potential, you know, additional level of funding to offset the, you know, no getting away from it, the significant uplift as part of the new contract.
Just one thing I'm still not quite clear of, and it's not really a question for you, Gareth, it's probably a question for Faye and for Pete maybe. At some point, in private sector, it's normally the audit committee that decides what's happening with the external audit, and they sign off who they're going to select, what the procurement's going to be. We heard earlier from Holly about getting 3 tenders and everything for new contracts. So obviously we use PSAA. How often do we get to decide that we're going to use them? At the end of the contract. That's a 5-year contract. So, so my question is, when does this contract end and when did it start?
This is the first year, and the PSA, the appointing new external auditors is kind of governed under regulations, and we had to get a council decision to be part of the PSAA. It's that you know, stringent in terms of the procurement.
So sorry, just on that point then, when did we decide to enter into this contract?
So we decided to be part of the PSAA, like the previous financial year. It was awarded as part of the PSAA in October 2022, I think it was. So it was during 2022 we took the decision to be part of the PSAA procurement. And
is that including taking the decision to enter into this contract this year?
It automatically once the choices are at that point in at the point of that decision, you're effectively saying the council could appoint an external auditor, or enter into this arrangement. That decision needs formal ratification, and then that takes forever, as Faye's saying. We've done this twice, where we've gone through the PSA route.
But if we don't want to go with this anymore, when do we get that option not to go with it?
In another 5 years.
But when did we get the option to when did we know? Normally, you get to know what the fees are going to be before you enter. Not in this occasion.
No,
so we sign up to it without knowing.
Precisely. Because basically what happens is PSAA, Big Brother, they basically then go out to the market, and they're doing precisely what we were talking about with Holly. So they see what's on the market, they decide, and as I was saying, they then set the fee rate. So you're opting into a consortium, not knowing the rates.
Sorry, we could go round and round in circles in this, and I have some sympathy with what Councillor Bluff has said in terms of the high cost, bearing in mind we've got tight financial constraints year on year. And I'm just wondering, and it was Gareth that mentioned it, I believe, that we may get some funding to assist us. If that's the case, can we not have some feedback on this very topic to see whether or not we are going to get some assistance with the high cost? With the debate that's gone so far, believe it or not, Dave, even as a layman, I understand, but my view is we are where we are at the present time.
Thank you, John. Yes, Gareth, and then...
I was just going to add, Chair, just for some context. So in the original PSAA, the first PSAA contract, which commenced for financial years 18-19, and then for this one, which commences financial years 23-24, over 99% of the nearly 500 local authorities, that's councils, police, fire, pension funds, national parks, over 99% of them opted to use PSAA as a central procurement function. There were a handful in 5 years ago and last year that opted to run their own procurement process, which, there's opportunities and risks from doing that. So, you may not get a particularly long shortlist, because it can't be that long anyway, because there's only half a dozen firms that are in the market, and not all of them may choose to bid, and you may not get as competitive a fee that PSAA have come up with potentially, and certainly, you know, that is an issue. That is an issue for, you know, some councils were thinking of going down that route, but ultimately, you know, ended up going through the overall national procurement via PSAA.
Yeah,
I suppose just a final point, that there is some context here as well in terms of NHS, where NHS used to be part of that central procurement function back in the Audit Commission days. They then came out of that particular procurement, and all NHS bodies now do their own procurement process. And interestingly, there have been instances where NHS organisations did not have an auditor, and essentially NHS England and the Department of Health had to basically twist the arms of certain audit firms to go and audit XYZ NHS Trust, because they'd had no interest in the procurement, and they were left essentially without an auditor. So that is a potential risk if you go down and procure things individually.
if I remember rightly, I'll come back to you in a minute, Faye, when we first went down the route of having the PSAA administer our procurement on our behalf, we could have gone by ourselves, we could have thrown our hat in, say, with Barnsley and Rotherham, and set up a little group ourselves and do it, or go to the experts, the recognised body who were carrying out it nationwide. And we I think as a committee we discussed it, and then at full council it was discussed that we would be better using the PSAA to take on this role, and we also discussed the renewal to stick with it. And Debbie's right, we did have this discussion about fees some time ago and why we're paying extra and this and that, but we put our faith in the PSAA to negotiate, to procure for us the best package available. So
no, I was going to say something similar. The report that it was January 2022 when we actually took it to council, and in the report it outlines all those reasons in terms of the market, sustainability, actually getting an auditor. So there were a number of the value for money. So the report outlines a lot of those points and why we did kind of commit with PSAA. I will take the action in terms of I'll need to think about how we raise in terms of the funding, because there hasn't been any mention. Like previously there was an allocation, but there hasn't been any mention at all. So I will consider how we might do that, and I can take away that action.
Actually, I'm just while the chair's out, I just still have a question. So just to bottom this out, there is no recourse or any break clause with the PSAA. Okay, so we can't go back until the next round.
I think there is something in there that says if there's a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between management and the auditor, or the audit committee and the auditor, you can go to PSAA and either request one of the other audit firms that are on PSAA's framework, yeah, or
same fee.
Or yeah, but it would probably it will be at the same fee, or you. I don't know if there's a formal break clause where you could then run your own procurement process, but if it's the breakdown in relationship point, it would be at the same fee whichever firm came in instead of GT.
All right, thanks. I'm not going to get anywhere else with that, but thank you.
Although looking at it, not wanting to stir a hornet's nest up, Gareth, we've just, me and Faye are just scanning down the spreadsheet from PSA, and speculatively, because my hypothesis I've just formulated, that it's to do with the scale of your budget. We thought, right, so it goes Barnsley, low, Rotherham next level up, next tier, Doncaster, Sheffield. Right, it's going to be about £500,000 based on their sort of budget. It's not. Theirs is just slightly higher than ours. It's with KPMG. So there's other logics in here.
So, I suppose my response to that,
Not wanting
Debbie,
to throw-
I think, you know, that's a legitimate question, but it's not one for GT because, you know, it's nothing to do with us. So I think, you know, you've probably fair to raise that with your contact at PSAA and say,
Yeah.
why is ours only a fraction below a much bigger neighbour?
Please tell me it's got nothing to do with us becoming a city.
Because I was looking at Wakefield's, because Wakefield's usually a comparison with us, and theirs is broadly in keeping with ours as well. So it's and they're a city, because I couldn't find it at first. I'm thinking, where's Wakefield? And they're listed under City of Wakefield. So
Could we please leave that with you, just to come back with an understanding as to how we got there? I appreciate it's not actually a Grant Thornton assessment, but if we could just understand it a bit further. Thank you.
I think we've all learnt a little bit over this side. Yeah. So thank you for. Yeah. Thank you for bearing with us.
That was Gareth Aston Martin, a partner.
Yeah. So I will now read out the recommendation within the report for item 13. The Audit Committee is asked to note Grant Thornton's Audit Plan 2023-24 and arrangements for the preparation of the 23-24 accounts. So is that move, colleagues? And seconded, all agreed. So the recommendation is noted. And item 14 is the External Auditor Grant Thornton Audit Committee Progress Report and Sector Update. Again, the report will be taken as read, so I'll ask Gareth and Perminder if they wish to bring any specific issues to members' attention or add anything to the report since it was drafted. Gareth, Perminder?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this, if I may. Not proposing to go through the document, leave that for you to read at your leisure. Just two things to draw to your attention. One is the timeline, which Gareth has already mentioned. So we are on track. And the aim is to finish by the end of the calendar year with the Auditor's Annual Report being presented to the January Committee next year. And the second thing just want to draw to your attention is on page 174 of the pack, which is the financial trajectory of the local government sector. And that just indicates very vividly the pressures that local authorities are under and the number of authorities that actually are likely to be under distress in this and the next financial year. But I'll let you read the report and the detail, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Perminder. Does any member wish to speak? Oh, absolutely. And Austin's not asked me any questions, so this is a really easy one, Perminder. So you've got off lightly, I think. And I don't have any questions either. This is brilliant. We've got to do this more often. So I'll read out the recommendation with this report. So the Audit Committee is asked to note the Audit Committee Progress Report and Sector Update. Is that moved? Yeah. Seconded? Seconded. Yep, excellent. Oh, all agreed. You see, Austin, you ought to walk out more often. Right, the recommended noted, and without... Oh, here he is. I'll let him come back, actually. So that recommendation is noted. And that does conclude the business items of the day, unless our chair has actually got anything else.
Yes, I did. Sorry. Yes, sorry about that, colleagues. Yes, sorry.
Just so you're aware,
We have actually approved the report.
Yes, that's fine. I did quite catch you as I was coming in. Yeah, just closing remarks really from myself. That this meeting today has been very, very interesting, very informative for us all. But it does feel very much, in general terms, like the April Audit Committee that we've had for the last 2 years, which I guess because there's a very similar themes on the agenda. But from that, I'm taking a great deal of positive assurance that's been coming over to the Audit Committee from officers and from external audit during what has been, once again, a very challenging year. And for the Audit Committee, it's reassuring that our risk governance and control arrangements remain strong and effective. And I think the colleagues are in agreement with that. I hope they are. So we've noted the recommendation on the previous item. So that concludes today's business, and I thank everyone for their attendance, and I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.